The first time I died for the alien queen. She screamed so loudly that every human ship in orbit heard it through the static. A sound so raw, so broken, so impossible, that our admirals stopped calling her a monster and started calling her what she was. A ruler who had just watched the only human who ever bowed to her by choice burn alive inside the heart of her dying world. I remember the heat before I remember the pain. I remember the white glow of the reactor chamber blooming through my visor. I remember Queen Serapha behind the armored glass with all four of her hands pressed against it. Her crown of black chitin cracked, her silver eyes wide, her mandibles trembling as she tried to order me back, tried to command the emergency locks open, tried to make the universe obey her one more time. But the universe has always had a habit of ignoring queens and listening to fools, and I was the biggest fool the human fleet had ever trained. Lieutenant Arden Vale, diplomatic marine, hazard engineer, temporary hostage, accidental war hero, and apparently the only creature stupid enough to walk into a collapsing Antheri brood reactor because the queen of an enemy species had whispered my name like it mattered. The Antheri had been our nightmare for 9 years. Insectoid sovereign clans from beyond the veil, glass-winged warships, living armor, venom lances, queens who ruled through pheromone symphonies and genetic oaths. They did not negotiate, they did not surrender. They did not understand individual sacrifice because no one in a hive died alone. Every drone died as a note in the same song. Every soldier dissolved back into the body of the colony. Humans hated them because they broke our colonies on Titan and Ceres. They hated us because we killed 3 queens in counterstrikes and salted their clutch moons with sterile fire. It was a clean war only in the lies of command reports. Dirty everywhere else. Dirty in refugee holds. Dirty in nurseries without oxygen. Dirty in the silence after orbital bombardment. Then my shuttle was shot down above there, their sacred nesting planet, and I was dragged before Serapha, Black Crown of the 9th brood, expecting execution. Instead, she tilted her head, tasted the air, and asked why I smelled of grief but stood like defiance. That was how everything started. Not with diplomacy, not with treaties, not with some grand speech from Earth. It's just a wounded human prisoner and an alien queen, curious enough to delay killing him for one more day. She should have eaten my heart in the old ceremonial way. Her generals wanted it. Her priest mothers hissed for it. Her swarm captains clicked their blades against the obsidian floor. But Serapha kept me in the living palace and questioned me for weeks, at first through translation walls. Then through stolen human words spoken in a voice like silk dragged across steel. She wanted to know why humans named their dead, why we carried images of family into battle, why our soldiers broke orders to rescue enemies, why one human pilot had flown his burning fighter into an Antheri carrier rather than eject. I told her we were sentimental apes with bad impulse control. She did not laugh then. She rarely laughed in those days. But her antennae shifted in the way I later learned meant amusement. In return, I asked her why Antheri workers sang 2 eggs, why their queens never slept, why every chamber in the palace had one empty alcove carved with the names of extinct broods. And she said, because memory must have a body. Arden Vale, or grief, will breed teeth. I hated her at first. I need that understood. Because the holodramas later made it look like destiny. Like I saw her and instantly recognized some tragic beauty under the armor. Nonsense. I hated the sharp angles of her face. The way her guards watched my throat. The smell of resin and blood in her palace corridors. The banners made from molted royal wings. I hated that she could ask beautiful questions while her army still killed humans beyond the moons. But hatred is a coal that cools when held too long. And captivity has a way of turning enemies into weather. Then into routine. Then into something dangerously close to familiar. She let me repair the broken oxygen converters in the human prisoner ward. She let me send one encrypted message to Earth proving I was alive. She ordered her healers to study human pain responses so they would stop using treatments that felt like acid under the skin. Small mercies, maybe political calculations, maybe curiosity again, but I watched her execute one of her own captains for starving, captured children. Watched her stand in the nursery afterward while human kids slept in warm cocoons beside antheory hatchlings. And my hatred became complicated, which is the first step toward disaster by the 7th month. I was no longer kept in chains by the 9th. I was no longer called prisoner by the 11th. She asked me to stand beside her during the first secret parley with Admiral Cho, and everyone in that chamber looked at me as if I had betrayed my species simply by still breathing. The peace almost happened there, almost one thin bridge over an ocean of bones, until the Red Admiral of Earth launched a forbidden strike on Vare, claiming Serafa was gathering brood fleets for an invasion. He was wrong. Or maybe he was afraid of being wrong too late. The strike cracked the planet's mantle, poisoned the clutch seas, and destabilized the old brood reactor under the palace, the one that powered the planetary shields if it failed. The atmosphere would ignite in a chain reaction of ionized spores, killing every antheory hatchling, every human prisoner, every envoy, every mimetic, every fool still standing on Vare. That was when the Queen gave her first order I refused. She ordered evacuation. I ordered myself into the reactor descent shaft. She followed me as far as the pressure gate, wounded, bleeding blue-black from the shoulder where Palace Stone had pinned her, taller than me, even hunched, terrible and magnificent, and more frightened than any monarch should ever allow herself to be seen. Arden, she said, not lieutenant, not human, not prisoner, just Arden. The chamber is flooded with hard radiation. Your marrow will fail before you reach the core. I told her the manual bypass was built by a civilization with hands, not claws, and I had 2 of them. She struck the glass hard enough to web it with cracks. I am Queen, she said. I forbid this. I looked back at her through my scorched visor, and because I was human, because our species has always confused love and rebellion, because no one had ever explained to my bones the difference between impossible and inconvenient, I smiled and said, "Then stop me. You know the old myth, maybe? The noble human walks into fire, saves the alien queen, dies cleanly, becomes a symbol. Statues, songs, a treaty signed over ashes. That is the version children learn. The truth is uglier." I crawled for the last 20 meters. My suit cooked my skin, my eyes bled inside the visor. My hand shook so badly, I missed the override 3 times. I cursed every god humanity had invented and several antheory ones for variety. I screamed when the coolant rods vented. I begged my dead mother not to look. Then I jammed my melted hand into the manual cradle and held the failsafe down while the reactor ate itself inward instead of outward. Through the glass, through the storm, through every alarm on that dying planet, I saw Serafa watching me, not as a queen watches a servant, not as a ruler watches a tool, but as someone learning too late that a single life can become heavier than an empire. And when my heart stopped, hers changed forever. 3 years later, I woke up in a garden that should not have existed, under a violet sky, with silver flowers breathing mist around me and a queen of monsters curled at the foot of my bed, like a dragon guarding stolen treasure. I did not know where I was. I did not know why my hands were smooth and unburned. I did not know why my lungs felt new. But I knew her immediately. Serafa had scars now, long pale seams across her crown and throat, one antenna broken halfway down. Her royal armor replaced by dark ceremonial silk woven through chitin plates. She looked older, not in the human way. Antheory did not wrinkle. They accumulated gravity, and she carried enough of it to bend the room. I tried to sit up. She moved faster than thought, her hands pressing me back with impossible gentleness. "No," she said, voice shaking in human English. "No sudden movement. Your body is still accepting memory." I stared at her, accepting what she closed all 4 eyes. A gesture I had never seen from her before. Shame, maybe prayer. "Your neural imprint was recovered from your suit buffer," she said. "The last 9 minutes were fragmented. Most of the pain was removed. Not enough. I am sorry. Your fleet declared resurrection illegal. Mine declared human reconstruction blasphemy. So I broke both laws. I sat there in that impossible garden, looking at the woman, the creature, the queen I had died for, and felt the coldest fear of my life, not because I was alive, but because someone had loved me with the full authority of a sovereign state and no ethical restraint whatsoever. Outside the garden, beyond translucent walls, I saw ships drifting above a vast city of black spires and green terraces. Not Ver. Ver was gone. Not Earth either. The architecture rose in living spirals, and theory resin fused with human steel. Banners of both species hanging in the wind. Children running on bridges, some human, some antheory, some wearing translator beads and laughing at whatever nonsense. Children across the galaxy find funny before adults teach them history. The war had ended, I realized. The treaty had held. My death had done what command briefings and mass graves could not. And Serapha had built a peace partly on my ashes, then stolen me back from them. I should have been grateful. Maybe part of me was. A small, stunned animal part that touched its own pulse and trembled. But gratitude is not simple when it wakes inside a manufactured body. I asked her how many times they had tried to rebuild me. She did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. I asked how many failed. The flowers around the bed tightened their petals. Reacting to her pheromones, she said, 12 bodies grew without continuity. 3 woke without memory. 1 suffered. I ended that attempt myself. I looked at her hands, all 4 of them. Delicate enough to hold a glass flower, strong enough to crush a helmet. And I saw the ghost of myself in each palm, copies, failures, almost Dardens. Biological drafts discarded in the margins of grief. She reached toward me, stopped before touching, and whispered, I refuse to let death be the only thing in this universe that could disobey me. That was the first time I understood I had not been resurrected into peace. I had been resurrected into devotion, sharpened into a cage. The medical suite became my world for 17 days. Physicians came and went. Human doctors from the Union, antheory gene singers, one Martian cyberneticist who kept muttering that this violated 6 treaties and at least 2 natural laws. They tested my reflexes, memory, immune response, language retention, trauma markers, soul, if such a thing had a measurable chemical signature. Serapha remained every hour, every minute, seated beside the bed or standing near the door, refusing sleep until her attendants threatened sedation. She did not threaten the doctors, not directly. She only watched them with those silver eyes until their hands became extremely careful. When I coughed, she rose. When I winced, she hissed. When a nurse drew blood, the queen's claws slid halfway out before she forced them back. Once, after a scanner overloaded and burned my shoulder, she slammed the technician against the wall hard enough to crack resin, then released him before I could speak. Horrified at herself, I am learning restraint, she said afterward, as if confessing a sin. I told her restraint usually worked better before attempted murder. Her mandibles twitched. That time, she almost laughed. I asked for news. She gave it cautiously, as if facts might bruise me. Earth had joined the Concordat. Admiral Cho had become High Marshal. The Red Admiral was tried after the Ver strike, then assassinated before sentencing by a human widow whose children died on Europa. The in theory 9th brood survived only because I held the bypass long enough for evacuation. Serapha had abdicated half her emergency powers after the treaty, then reclaimed them during the Reconstruction crisis. Humans called her the Black Queen of Peace. Antheory called her she who was denied her dead. And I, apparently, was a saint martyr. Propaganda icon, school mural, recruitment scandal, and banned topic in 3 parliaments. My younger brother had named his daughter after me. My father had died 2 winters after my memorial. My mother was still alive but refused all official ceremonies because, in her words, the military had already taken 1 son and could stop trying to polish the theft. That broke me more than the resurrection, I think, learning that life had gone on. Not cruelly, not kindly, just onward, that the world had spent 3 years arranging itself around the shape of my absence. And now I had returned like a clerical error in the records of grief. Serapha tried to hold me when I cried. I pushed her away, not hard, but enough. Her hands withdrew as if burned. I told her I wanted to speak to my mother. She said the message was already prepared but not sent. I asked why her pheromones flooded the room. Bitter, metallic, afraid, because if she asks me to return you to Earth, I do not know whether I am strong enough to obey. There are sentences that expose more than confession ever could. That one stood between us like a loaded weapon. I left the bed on day 18, against medical advice. And Serapha nearly declared martial law over my legs. She shadowed me through the palace garden. 2 royal guards ahead, 6 behind, drones in the upper canopy. A human security officer, pretending not to report my pulse to her every 10 seconds. I walked barefoot on warm stone while silver flowers bent toward my skin. Attracted to my new body's engineered biochemistry, Serapha explained that the garden was grown from Vare seed stock. The last living archive of her homeworld, each plant descended from samples saved during the evacuation. She had placed my recovery chamber there because, she said, you saved their first breath, they should guard yours. I wanted to stay angry. Anger felt clean. It gave shape to the horror of being remade. But then, a small, anthery child approached on trembling limbs, carrying a folded human paper crane in both upper hands, her translator bead chirping with nervous static. Are you the firewalker? She asked. Sarufa went still. The guards stiffened. I crouched because the child looked ready to bolt. Depends who is asking, I said. She held out the crane. My egg mother says I breathe because of you. The little one said. Then she looked at Serapha and added, she says the queen cried so much the night you died that the whole brood forgot how to sing. Serapha turned away, but not before I saw it, the flinch. The wound under the crown. The child ran back to her caretakers, leaving me with a paper bird in my hand and a queen beside me who had conquered fleets but could not survive one honest memory. I asked her if that was true. She said, queens do not cry. I waited, she said. Vare reigned for 9 days after the reactor collapse. The atmosphere condensed ash over the evacuation fleet. Superstitious minds called it morning. I touched the crane's wing. And you? I asked. She looked toward the city. I made no sound, she said. I could not, if I had made a sound. Every surviving daughter of my brood would have heard me break. That evening, I opened the first message from my mother. It was not tearful, not dramatic, not what the feeds would have wanted. She appeared in her kitchen on Earth. Hair whiter, shoulders smaller, eyes exactly the same as the ones I remembered from childhood when I had broken windows and lied badly. She looked into the recorder for a long time before speaking. Arden, she said, I am told this is really you. I am also told by 3 admirals, 2 priests, 1 doctor, and a bug queen that I should prepare myself emotionally. I am 71 years old, and I have prepared for enough. So here is what will happen. You will call me. You will tell me what you remember about the blue mug I hated and you loved. And then I will decide whether the universe has played a miracle or a cruel joke. Also, if the queen is listening, tell her I am grateful and furious. Mothers are allowed to be both. I laughed then, really laughed. The first human sound I recognized in my new chest. Serapha stood in the corner, silent, stricken by the message. I told her my mother wanted to speak. The queen's composure cracked visibly. She asked whether I wished her absent. I said no, then called Earth. When my mother answered, and I told her about the blue mug with the chipped handle, the one I used for soup during winter storms. She covered her mouth and made a sound that turned me into a child again. Serapha sank to one knee, not from weakness, but because Anthi-Airy queens lowered themselves only before hatching cradles in the dead. My mother noticed. Of course she noticed everything. Why is she kneeling? She asked. I said, guilt, probably. Serapha lifted her head and said, Mrs. Vale, I stole your son from death without your permission. I would accept judgment. My mother stared at her through the screen, then said, get up, your majesty. I have not decided whether to slap you or feed you, and I cannot do either properly while you are on the floor. For one fragile hour, the universe behaved like healing was possible. Then the assassins came. They arrived inside a mercy delegation from the outer colonies. 12 humans with clean records, trauma histories, and bodies full of dormant biotech purchased from Anthony separatists. Vengeance dressed as diplomacy, they did not target Serapha first. That was what made them clever. They targeted me, because by then every faction understood what the Queen herself had not hidden well enough. My life had become the hinge of her sanity. Kill me. And the Black Queen of Peace might become the Black Queen of Ash. The first blast took out the garden wall. The second killed 2 royal guards. The third filled the air with iron dust designed to shred Anthony respiratory membranes. Serapha crossed the distance between us faster than any living thing should move, wrapped all 4 arms around me, and took the shrapnel across her back. I hit the floor under her armored body, deaf, blind, tasting copper. Her blood poured hot over my shirt, blue-black, luminous. She made a sound I had never heard, a low vibrating command that turned every Anthony in the palace into a weapon. Somewhere beyond her, humans screamed, drones shrieked. Gunfire hammered through the garden. I tried to crawl out from beneath her. She pinned me with one shaking hand. "Stay!" she hissed. I shouted that she was bleeding. She lowered her face close to mine. Eyes silver and feral. "You died when I let you go." She said, "Never again." That was the moment tenderness became terrifying. The attack lasted for minutes. The consequences lasted months. Serapha survived because royal anatomy is stubborn and because human. Surgeons now knew enough in theory physiology to improvise miracles. The assassins did not survive. Not all because of guards. One reached the recovery chamber with a plasma blade and found me, standing there with a surgical laser in one hand and a broken force stand in the other. I do not remember deciding to fight. I remember his eyes widening because martyrs are supposed to remain symbolic. Not stab you through the thigh with hospital furniture. I remember shouting for the nurses to run. I remember the old body memory of combat returning, ugly and useful. He slashed my ribs open before I burned through his weapon arm by the time Serapha's guards arrived. I was on the floor again, alive, furious, and extremely tired of people making political statements with my bloodstream. When Serapha woke after surgery, restrained by medical webbing, she asked for me before she asked for her brood. They brought me in bandaged and limping, her eyes focused, then widened at the blood on my dressings. The monitor vines around her bed spiked violently. I told her I was fine. She tore 2 restraints loose before the doctor sedated her. After that, she changed the palace protocols. No human delegation within 500 meters, no unscreened air, no solo movement, no open balconies, no sharp utensils in my rooms unless I filed a request. She moved me from the guest wing to the royal inner chambers, posted guards outside my bathing room, assigned a swarmlet drone that followed me into the library and clicked disapprovingly when I climbed ladders. I told her this was imprisonment. She said it was protection. I said prisoners were often protected from escape. She said nothing, which was worse. We fought for the first time 3 nights later, not with blades or armies, but in the Royal Observatory under a ceiling of captured starlight. I told her I was leaving for Earth as soon as the doctors cleared me. She went motionless. Predator still. Queen still. Broken woman still? No, she said. Just that? No? I laughed because otherwise I would have shouted. You do not get to say no, Serapha, she said. I have watched you die once. I have felt your mind vanish from every sensor while my world burned. I have stood over 12 bodies that were not you and begged them to become you. I have held your blood in my hands twice. Do not speak to me of what I get to survive. I told her my life was not a wound she could bandage shut by standing on top of it. Her pheromones flared so sharply the glass plants along the wall curled inward. She said, "Your freedom killed you." I said, "No, my choice saved you." There it was. The truth neither of us could soften. She turned from me then, looking out at the city. I saw her reflection in the glass. Crowned scars, rigid jaw, eyes shining but dry. "You think I do not know that?" she whispered. "Every law I wrote after the war, every child breathing in this city, every human who walks our streets without chains, every brood song that includes your species, all of it was purchased by your choice, and I worship that choice, Arden. I worship it so completely that I cannot bear to see you make another one. That was the closest she had ever come to saying love, and it landed like a threat. I wanted to be cruel. Maybe she deserved cruelty, but I remembered her behind the reactor glass. Remembered the child with the paper crane. Remembered waking in the garden because grief had grown hands and dragged me back. So I said quietly, "If you keep me here against my will, then the man you loved really did die in that reactor. And whatever you resurrected is just your favorite prisoner." She left without answering. The next morning, the guards remained. But the door was unlocked. Freedom, I learned, is sometimes just the distance between an open door and the person afraid to walk through it. I did not leave immediately, partly because my body was still unreliable, partly because Earth was not ready for me, partly because the palace had become a political minefield, and partly because the truth was inconvenient. I did not want to abandon her while assassins still circled. That made me angry at myself, at her, at the whole myth that had swallowed us. The Concordat Council summoned us both to testify after the attack. Human hardliners accused Sarofa of manufacturing my resurrection as a loyalty weapon. Anthierry traditionalists accused me of corrupting their queen with mammalian chaos. One senator asked whether I considered myself legally dead. I said, only during committee hearings, which made half the chamber laugh and the other half hate me. Sarofa sat beside me, veiled in black, silent until a minister suggested placing me under neutral custody for my own safety. Then the air in the chamber dropped 10 degrees. She rose slowly and said, "The last government that placed Ardenvale behind locked doors caused a war crime. Choose your next sentence carefully." Not diplomatic, admittedly, but effective. The council compromised by granting me protected civilian status, meaning I could travel, speak, refuse, consent, and punch journalists within reasonable limits. The last clause was added after an incident outside the hearing hall. Sarofa signed the order with a hand that barely trembled, then handed me the travel seal herself. "For Earth," she said, "for Mars, for any world that will receive you." I looked at the seal, then at her. "You are not going to stop me?" I asked. "Every instinct I possess demands that I stop you." She said, "Every lesson you taught me demands that I do not." I asked what she would do if I left. She said, "Rule badly for a while. Perhaps recover poorly. Certainly survive. Because that is what you ordered me to do when you died, the day I departed for Earth." Half the city gathered in silence. No parade, no anthem. Just humans and Anthony lining the terraces while I walked toward the shuttle with one bag and a chest full of borrowed breath. Sarofa came with me to the boarding ramp, royal guard at a respectful distance, wind lifting the edges of her black mantle. For a moment, she looked exactly as she had behind the reactor glass, powerful and helpless. A monarch trapped outside the place where the person she loved was choosing pain. She held out a small object, my old dog tags warped by heat, recovered from the suit that preserved my imprint. I took them. The metal was blackened, my name barely readable. I asked why she had kept them. She said, "Because when I had nothing else, I needed proof you had been real." I almost stayed understand that. I almost dropped the bag and stepped back into the cage, because the cage had eyes, full of grief and hands that had pulled me out of oblivion. But humanity did not become humanity by mistaking pity for duty, and love that cannot survive distance is just fear-wearing perfume. So I touched her lower hand once, gently, and said, "I will come back when it is my choice." Sarofa's throat worked around words that did not come. Then she bent forward until her brow touched mine, an Anthony gesture older than speech. "Go, Ardenvale," she whispered before I become weak. Earth smelled like rain and exhaust and ocean salt. Too many soft things, too many round edges, too much blue. My mother met me at the private arrival field with a cane in one hand and fury in the other. She slapped me, then hugged me, then slapped my arm, because the first slap had been for dying, and the second was for taking so long to call properly. I spent 6 weeks in her little coastal house learning how to be alive in human gravity. Reporters camped beyond the dunes. Veterans sent letters. Children sent drawings of me with wings for some reason. Priests argued about whether my soul had continuity. Lawyers argued about whether I owed back taxes. My mother argued with anyone who stepped onto the porch without casserole or legal authority. At night I dreamed of heat, glass, silver eyes, and the sounds Sarafa had not made because a whole brood would have heard her break. I should say I healed there, but healing is not a clean ascent. It is a trench war against memory. Some mornings I woke convinced my skin was melting. Some afternoons I forgot my own reflection, because the face in the mirror was 3 years too young. Some evenings I hated Sarafa so sharply I could taste it, then missed her with equal violence 5 minutes later. My therapist, a calm lunar woman with steel-gray braids, said trauma bonds are complex. I said so are interspecies treaties. She said jokes are useful until they become doors you lock from the inside. I disliked her immediately, which meant she was good at her job. Meanwhile, Sarafa sent one message each week, never asking me to return, never saying she missed me directly. Just fragments of life, the East Hatchery sang today. Your paper crane has survived 3 assassination attempts by curious larvae. I permitted a human bakery in the Royal District and regret everything. Flour is a military hazard. The swarmlet drone assigned to you refuses reassignment and has bitten to ministers. Then, in the 8th week, the messages stopped. No announcement came through official channels at first, only a tremor in the diplomatic feeds. Delayed meetings, canceled appearances, and theory envoys suddenly recalled. Then Admiral Cho called me on a secure line and looked older than any war hero should. Arden, she said, there has been a coup attempt inside the 9th brood. My resurrected heart seemed to pause. Sarafa, I asked. Alive, Cho said, but isolated. Separatist queens have declared her compromised by human influence. They have seized 3 brood fleets and taken hostages in the Vare archive. They are demanding your extradition and public termination as proof she renounces human contamination. My mother, listening from the kitchen doorway, said a word she had once grounded me for using. Cho continued, we are not asking you to come. In fact, officially, we are ordering you not to, I nodded, because official orders are important documents. Then asked when the next courier ship left orbit. Cho closed her eyes. Damn it, Arden, I said. Yes, Admiral. That was also my mother's assessment. Humanity has many flaws. Arrogance, impatience, an almost artistic talent for making bad tools before understanding why they are bad. But when someone we love is trapped behind enemy lines, we become mathematically unreasonable. The courier captain refused me at first. So did the embassy. So did the Union Medical Board. My mother did not refuse me. She packed sandwiches, painkillers, old wool socks, and my father's pocket knife. Then stood in the doorway while I dressed in civilian flight gear. You know she is dangerous, my mother said. I said yes. You know you are dangerous to her. I said yes again. You know this is not repayment. She continued, love is not accounting. I stopped with one boot half-laced. She came closer, smaller than I remembered, and somehow larger than every admiral I had ever met. Go because you choose to. Not because you died once and think that makes you responsible for everyone you saved. I tied the boot slowly, then said, I am going because she let me go. And now I have to prove that mattered. The pocket knife got me past the courier captain, not as a weapon, as a bribe. His grandfather had served with mine in the Europa evacuations. Small galaxy, old ghosts. By the time the Union realized I was aboard. We were past lunar control. Cho sent one message. I am not rescuing you if this becomes stupid. I replied, define stupid. She did not answer, which was wise. The journey to Concordat space took 4 days by folded transit. 4 days of reading intelligence briefs and trying not to imagine Sarafa wounded. Caged, executed by her own kind, the separatist leader was Queen Merix of the Ash Brood. Old bloodline, purist ideology, believed the treaty had weakened in theory destiny. Believed resurrection was sacrilege unless performed on royal tissue. Believed humans were useful only as cautionary meat. Every revolution needs doctrine. Every doctrine needs a corpse. I was apparently auditioning for the role. We arrived outside the 9th brood capital to find the sky full of warships. Union carriers on one side, rebel brood fleets on the other. Loyalist vessels locked in defensive orbit. No one firing because the Vare archive hung between them. A moon-sized memorial vault containing the genetic future of half a species and the legal evidence of the peace. One shot would turn history into debris. I took a shuttle down under medical envoy credentials, which were technically valid if one defined medical as likely to require doctors soon. The capital was under curfew. Terraces dark, streets empty. Propaganda spores drifting through the air in red clouds. My old swarmlet drone found me before the Loyalists did, dropped from a roof, clicked furiously, and rammed its small armored head into my chest like an angry metal cat. "Missed you too," I whispered. It bit my sleeve and dragged me into an alley. The Loyalist resistance was being run out of a bakery. Because history has a sense of humor, and flour really was a military hazard. The human baker, a broad woman from Nairobi named Sira. No relation to the Queen, though. She enjoyed confusing Antheory officials. Had hidden 20 royal guards in storage tunnels under sacks of grain. She recognized me instantly, swore, and handed me a rolling pin. I asked where Sarafa was. The room went silent. A wounded guard captain lowered his head. "Inner palace," he said. "Sealed by ash-brewed forces, alive at last signal. Refusing to evacuate while hostages remain in the archive." I said, "Of course she is." He looked at me with compound eyes, dulled by exhaustion. "She ordered that if you came, we were to restrain you, sedate you if necessary, and place you on the next outbound vessel." I looked around at the bakery full of injured Loyalists, none of whom moved. Then the captain added, "She did not specify how we were to accomplish this against your known stupidity. Good Queen, thorough paperwork. We made the plan over stolen maps and burnt coffee. Merrick's would address the brood at dawn from the archive atrium, demanding Sarafa publicly renounce the human treaty and surrender me. If Sarafa refused, hostages died. If she agreed, peace died. If Union forces attacked, everyone died. The archive had old maintenance arteries built before modern security. Too narrow for Antheory soldiers, wide enough for a human with poor survival instincts. I could enter through the coolant channels, reach the broadcast core, expose Merrick's hostage placements, and open a path for Loyalist extraction teams. Simple, suicidal, nostalgic. The guard captain objected. The baker objected. The drone objected by biting the map. I told them I had already died in one Antheor utility system and was unlikely to enjoy repeating myself. But if their engineers kept designing empire-saving infrastructure around human-sized manual access, that was on them. Crawling through the archive arteries felt like crawling through the throat of memory. Translucent walls pulsed with stored genetic light. Millions of broodlines sleeping in crystal strands. Vare's lost forests, extinct worker castes. Songs encoded into protein, entire futures reduced to cold blue glow. I heard Merrick's speech through the ducts before I saw her. Her voice amplified through pheromone and machine, sisters of the old blood. "Behold what mercy is made of us. A queen kneels to apes. A brood shapes law around one resurrected male. A species born to command now asks permission from creatures who name every dead thing and call that weakness love." I nearly laughed at that because she had misunderstood the most dangerous part of us. Naming the dead was not weakness. It was inventory. Then I saw Sarafa. She stood in the atrium below, bound in ceremonial restraint silk, crown uncovered. Scars visible to the entire brood, guards around her. Hostages kneeling near the archive wells. Merrick's towering opposite, ash-white chitin, gold-veined wings. Beautiful in the way knives are beautiful, Sarafa looked thinner. Exhausted, one eye swollen, but unbowed. Merrick's demanded the renunciation again. Say he corrupted you. Say the human death was a trick that poisoned your judgment. Say you reject the unnatural thing wearing Arden Vale's memory. Sarafa lifted her head and even through the duct, even half-starved and surrounded. She was still the Black Queen. "No," she said. Merrick's struck her hard enough to drop her to one knee. I forgot the plan for half a second, which is usually how people die. The drone behind me shocked my ankle. "Useful little tyrant?" I kept crawling, reached the broadcast core, and found a rebel technician guarding it. Anthony, adolescent, barely adult, blade shaking in all four hands. He saw me emerge from the vent and froze. "Firewalker," he whispered. I put one finger to my lips. He raised the blade. I raised my father's pocketknife, which was objectively pathetic in comparison. "Listen," I said quietly, "in about 2 minutes. Either your queen kills my queen, my fleet kills your archive, or we both do something intelligent by accident." He trembled, pheromones sour with fear. "Merrick says humans enslave queens," he said. I glanced down at Sarafa. Still refusing to bow? "No," I said. "We just make them worry themselves into tyranny." Very different problem. I do not know why he let me pass. Maybe because children raised after war inherit slogans, but not always hatred. Maybe because he saw the old dog tags around my neck and understood that myths bleed when cornered. He stepped aside. I connected the stolen transmitter, opened every emergency channel in the archive, and flooded the atrium screens with live images of Merrick's hidden charges planted along the gene vault supports. Charges that would detonate even if Sarafa complied. Because purists never planned to preserve the thing they claimed to worship. They planned to own the ashes. The atrium erupted. Loyalist guards moved, hostages scattered. Merrick screamed for my head, and I dropped from the broadcast balcony like a badly planned miracle. I landed poorly, because heroism is not choreography. Pain blasted through my knees. Someone shouted my name, Sarafa, of course. I looked up and saw her face transform from shock to terror to absolute rage. "Arden," she roared, not relieved, not grateful, furious, as if I had personally invented danger to offend her. Merrick's turned, saw me, and smiled. "There you are, dead man," she said. Sarafa tore one arm free of the restraint silk, with a sound like ripping metal. Merrick's guards raised rifles. Loyalists fired from the upper galleries. The atrium became thunder. I ran toward the hostages because apparently resurrection had done nothing for my survival instincts, dragging 2 human archivists behind a pillar before a blast cut the floor where they had been kneeling. Sarafa reached Merrick's through sheer violence, wounded or not, bound or not. She hit the Ash Queen with the force of 3 years of restrained grief. They crashed into the archive steps. Claws, wings, blood. Royal pheromones colliding so intensely humans vomited and Anthony froze. I tried to reach the charge controls, but Merrick's had linked them to her biometrics. If she died wrong, the archive died with her. The rebel technician from the core shouted this down at me. Helpful, horrifying, extremely late, then one of Merrick's guards shot him for helping. He fell from the platform. I caught him badly. Both of us slamming into the floor, his blood green-gold across my hands. He looked barely older than a recruit. I pressed my palm over the wound and called for a medic. He whispered, "I did not know she would burn the future." I said, "Tyrants rarely put that part on posters." The charge timer appeared on every screen. 3 minutes. There are moments when a battlefield becomes very quiet inside your skull. Not actually quiet, never actually quiet, but focused. Every panic thread burning away until only the shape of the problem remains. Merrick's alive and linked to the detonator, Sarafa trying not to kill her. Hostages trapped, archive supports rigged. No time for disarmament. Manual override in the lower coolant spine, according to the map. Because Anthony engineers, blessedly cursed, had once again built a human-sized crawl route into destiny. I looked at the access hatch, then at Sarafa. She saw me see it. Even while locked in combat, impossible as that sounds. She knew me too well. Her eyes widened. "No." She said across the chaos. No. This time I heard her. I wanted to run to the hatch. Every old instinct screamed for it. The clean answer, the beautiful sacrifice. The myth ready to close its jaws around me again, but my mother's voice came back. "Love is not accounting," and my own words followed. "My choice saved you, not my death." So I did something much harder than dying. I stayed alive and asked for help. I grabbed the rebel technician's combide, opened the loyalist channel, and shouted for every engineer, drone, baker, child, an inconveniently narrow species in the archive to converge on the lower coolant spine. Manual override needs continuous pressure on 6 relays, I said. No single hero nonsense. Bring tools, bring bodies, bring anything with hands. For half a second nothing happened, then humanity and the Antheri answered together. A human archivist sprinted first, then 3 Antheri workers. Then Sierra the baker, swinging a heat cutter, then royal drones. Then to rebel adolescents who decided apocalypse was a bad career path. The swarmlet drone shot past me like an offended missile. We tore open the coolant spine and found 6 relay cradles arranged around a radiation column, each one requiring force, heat, and timing. The old me would have gone in alone and cooked. The new me, the resurrected me, the man trying to be more than a martyr, shoved my hands into one relay and yelled instructions while others took the rest. Radiation alarms screamed, shields failed, skin burned. But distributed pain is survivable in ways lonely glory is not. We counted together human voices, Antheri clicks. Drone pulses 1, 2, 3, hold above us. Serapha stopped trying to defeat Merrick's and started trying to save her. That was the difference between them, the difference that made a queen worthy of survival. She pinned Merrick's against the steps, claws at her throat, and instead of tearing, she forced the Ash Queen's bleeding hand onto the biometric seal while we held the relays below. Merrick shrieked that mercy was infection. Serapha leaned close and said something I only heard later from a recording. Yes, she said, and he infected me first. The charge is disarmed at 1 second. 1 second. After all the speeches, fleets, doctrines, prophecies, and bloodlines. History balanced itself on one dirty, exhausted, ridiculous second. Merrick's was arrested, not executed, which angered everyone equally and was therefore probably correct. The hostages survived. The archive survived. The coup collapsed when the broadcast showed rebels helping loyalists in the coolant spine while their queen tried to destroy the future. Nothing ruins ideological purity faster than footage of your followers saving babies in Gene vaults beside the people they were told to hate. I spent the next 2 days in a medical tank because apparently relay radiation is still radiation even when shared. Serapha sat outside the glass the entire time. But this time she did not order anyone to keep me sedated, did not lock doors, did not threaten doctors beyond one brief misunderstanding involving a dosage error. When I woke, she was there, of course she was. But farther back, hands folded, giving me space, like it cost her blood. You stayed, she said. I blinked through tank fluid haze. You noticed you did not run into death, she said, as if naming a miracle. I tried, I admitted, then thought better of it, her eyes closed, pain and gratitude crossing her face together. I am glad you thought better, she whispered. When the tank drained and the medics left, she came to the bedside, but did not touch me until I lifted my hand. Then all 4 of hers surrounded it, careful, reverent, terrified. I told her about my mother's warning, about choice, about refusing to become the kind of symbol that only knows how to die. Serapha listened without interruption, then said, I built a cage from the shape of my fear and called it love. I said, yes, you did. She bowed her head. I will spend my life dismantling it, she said. I squeezed her hand. Start with the guards outside my bathroom. She made a soft clicking sound, almost laughter, ambitious. But I will negotiate. After the coup, the Concordat wanted ceremonies again. People adore ceremonies because they create the illusion that chaos has been properly filed. Serapha refused the first 3, accepted the 4th only because the hostages requested it. I stood beside her in the restored archive atrium while she addressed both species. No veil, no crown extensions. Scars visible, Merrick's trial pending. Rebel amnesty debated, fleets withdrawn from firing lines. She spoke in Anthari first, then human English. My brood, my allies, my accusers, I was taught that a queen must never be changed by one life, that rulers must absorb grief without bending, that survival belongs to those who harden around loss. I believed this then. A human prisoner asked why we sang 2 eggs, And later, he walked into fire so our children would breathe. I hardened after that, not into strength, but into fear. Fear made me possessive. Fear made me cruel in the name of protection. Fear made me forget the lesson his species keeps teaching the stars, that a life freely given is powerful, but a life freely lived is greater. She turned to me then, in front of everyone, which was unfair and politically devastating. Ardenvale is not my relic, not my saint, not my hostage. She said, he is alive, therefore he is unfinished. And no queen, no council, no grief, no myth has the right to finish him early. I hated how much I loved her in that moment. The crowd did not cheer at first. Anthieri do not cheer like humans. They vibrate, hum, release scent chords. Humans clap because we are simple creatures who enjoy hitting our hands together when feelings exceed vocabulary. Slowly, awkwardly, both began. Clicks and applause, hum and thunder. The archive shook with it. I looked at Sarafa and saw that she was trembling, not from fear this time, from release. My swarmlet drone sat on the podium and clicked as if taking credit for peace, which honestly might have been fair. Months passed, then a year. I visited Earth often, because my mother threatened to invade if I did not. Sarafa came once and spent 3 days being interrogated by a 71-year-old woman with soup, family albums, and no respect for royal intimidation. My niece climbed onto the queen's lap and decorated her crown scars with stickers. The security detail nearly fainted. Sarafa remained perfectly still for 2 hours because the child had fallen asleep in Queens. Apparently, do not disturb hatchlings of any species. The tabloids called it the softening of the Black Queen. My mother called it babysitting. I called it evidence that the universe had lost all narrative discipline. I did not move permanently into the palace. Not then, not under pressure. I kept an apartment in the Concordat capital, another on Earth. Taught crisis engineering to mixed species cadets. Testified in war crime tribunals. Consulted on reactor redesigns with explicit instructions that no future empire-saving mechanism require one idiot in a tube. Sarafa and I learned each other slowly, badly, honestly. There were relapses. Nights when she woke from brood dreams and came to my door shaking because she had felt me vanish again. Mornings when I found extra guards on my route and sent them back with rude notes. Days when I flinched from her intensity. Days when she flinched from my silence. Love did not fix trauma. It simply gave trauma a witness who could be told. No, not like that. Try again. And she did try. That was the part history never knew how to carve into statues. Effort, not sacrifice. Not the reactor, not the archive. Not the grand speeches, but the daily labor of a queen learning not to command. And a human learning not to vanish into heroism whenever fear entered the room. Sarafa learned to ask, "May I come with you?" Instead of ordering escorts, I learned to answer honestly instead of performing independence like a parade march. Sometimes I said yes, sometimes I said no, sometimes I said, "Wait here, I will come back," and she would go very still, then nod. And every time I returned, something ancient and frightened in her relaxed by one small degree. 5 years after my first death, on the anniversary of Vere, we went alone to the memorial garden. No cameras, no council, no guards close enough to hear. Just the two of us and the silver flowers grown from a dead world's seeds. My old dog tags hung from my neck. Her scars glowed faintly in the dusk. The paper crane from the child was preserved in a glass sphere beside the path. Frayed, ridiculous, sacred, Sarafa asked me whether I regretted the reactor. I told her the truth. Yes and no. I regretted the pain, the grief, the years stolen from my family, the copies that suffered because she could not let go. I did not regret the children who breathed. I did not regret the peace. I did not regret that she lived. She absorbed this carefully, as queens do, as survivors do. Then asked whether I regretted waking. That was harder. I looked across the garden at the city we had both broken and remade. Humans and Antheri, moving under the violet sky. Bakeries and brood halls. Schools where children learned both morning customs. Engineers replacing heroic death traps with team-accessible safeguards, a civilization stitched together by guilt, stubbornness, tenderness, and paperwork. I thought of my mother's kitchen, of Merrick's in trial chambers, of the rebel technician who survived and now taught propaganda ethics to adolescents, of the swarmlet drone asleep in my apartment sink for reasons no scientist had explained. Then I looked at Sarafa, who had dragged me from death for selfish reasons and then spent years becoming worthy of the life she had stolen back. "No," I said. "I do not regret waking." Her breath caught. Barely, but I heard it. Then I added, "But I am not staying because you resurrected me. I am not staying because I owe you. I am not staying because I died for you." Her hands tightened, then loosened. Practiced restraint. Painful restraint. I stepped closer and placed my palm against the scar over her heart, or where humans like to imagine a heart should be. "I am staying tonight because I choose to," I said. "Tomorrow, I will choose again." Sarafa bowed her head until her brow touched mine. And this time, there was no glass between us, no reactor, no cage, no army. Only the terrifying mercy of an open door, later. Historians would ask when the war truly ended. Some said it ended when the treaty was signed. Others when Merrick's failed. Others when the last refugee returned home. They were wrong. Wars do not end at tables or trials. They end in smaller places. In kitchens, in hospital rooms, in unlocked doors, in a queen's hands opening, when every instinct tells them to close. In a human learning that being brave does not always mean being the first to die. Sometimes it means remaining alive long enough to be loved without becoming property. Long enough to forgive without forgetting. Long enough to teach monsters and men the same lesson. The alien queen watched me die for her once. Now she refuses to let me leave her side. But these days, when I rise to go, she does not command, she does not cage. She only looks at me with those silver eyes, full of old fire and new discipline, and asks, "Will you return?" And because I am human, because we are impossible creatures, because we cross battlefields for strangers and crawl through maintenance shafts into history and come back from death, still arguing about bathroom guards. I smile, touch the ruined dog tags at my throat, and answer her the only way love can survive. "Yes, Sarafa, I will return because this time I get to choose."